guys, Casey here with the Coyote Works channel. Happy Saturday, and thanks for joining me on another trip as I explore some of the most remote backcountry in Oregon and try to uncover some of the little-known history that's scattered out across this desert country out here. So right now I'm just headed out Highway 20. I'm going to go through Brothers, and I'll go almost to Hampton, and then I'll cut south and continue to head southeast off the highway out there. I'm going to try to uncover a couple of pieces of history that were out in that area. Then I'll find some place, hopefully an hour or two before dark, to make camp. I got some pretty good food along. I'm looking forward to getting the pie irons back out, doing a little bit of campfire cooking tonight. I've got some good food planned for the evening. I'll tell you guys a little bit about the history of this area as we go through the country. Alright, so I just stopped here to do some quick map recon, and I'm using the Gaia GPS app. I use Gaia GPS a lot on my phone because it's just handy and I can have it in my pocket all the time. But I also sometimes use Backcountry Navigator loaded on a Samsung Galaxy Tab. Just a few miles further up the road, I decided to make my first stop, take a short hike, and investigate a place that I thought had the potential to be an old homestead site. Well, I didn't find any sign of an old homestead, but I did find my first unexpected treasure of the trip. Oh, interesting. There's an old knife laying on the ground right there. Wonder how long that's been laying there in the ground. Brass pins, old wooden handles. Let's see what else I can find around here. Alright, so that was a pretty good little stop. Let's check the map. I'm going to head back. Looks like I got about 7 miles. I'll go back down this road about 7 miles. And then I should hit this old Bill Brown horse camp out here. And I'll tell you guys a little bit about it along my way there. Bill Brown was a legendary character in this part of the country. He first moved to the area in 1882 after leaving a job as a school teacher where he made about $40 a month. Bill had scraped up enough money to start out life in Central Oregon with a small herd of sheep. That herd of sheep he grew, and soon he was into cattle, and in later years he got into horses. At the height of his career, Bill Brown had gone from making $40 a month as a school teacher to making over $140,000 a year and controlling one of the largest ranching empires in the entire West. So we're going to take a quick stop here and explore around a little bit, but this was the site of one of Bill Brown's horse camps. And this was a pretty extensive camp here. At one time there was a building, or maybe even a couple of buildings. I found the remains of some structures out there. That Bill Brown was a pretty amazing character, and the whole story of his empire is pretty interesting. And I'll tell you guys some more about it as we drive along in the Jeep. But first, let's take a little look around here and see what we can find. I'm about 70 miles or so from where we did the 2019 Coyote Works group Overland, which was kind of towards the northern end of where Bill Brown ran his horses. Right now where I'm at is I'm pushing out towards the southern end of where he ran his horses. But the mind-boggling thing is just how huge of a chunk of country that he had under his control when he was running horses out here. And he got extremely wealthy off of horses. He ran herds of thousands and thousands of horses across this country. And at one point, it seemed like Bill Brown probably was unstoppable, and he was destined to be one of the wealthiest men in the West. But then the market changed for the horses, and the bottom dropped out of it. And within a very short period of time, he was selling off portions of his holdings out here. And basically, from what I understand, died pretty much penniless. So, pretty interesting story, but all across this country, there's little chunks of his camps and the history of his empire out here. This is pretty cool right here, an old wooden water trough. And I'm looking over here at this collapsed fence. So the corral walls were just solid juniper posts. Just juniper posts set right next to each other. And that was an immense amount of effort. And out here, as sparse as the trees were, they had to go far and wide to cut enough trees to be able to build a corral like this. But he was just wealthy enough that he had, you know, at times dozens and dozens and dozens of hands working for him. And he had the ability to be able to develop so much of this country out here with these little satellite camps. And then all the way back at the northern end of his range, he had a store and a blacksmith shop and a hotel back up on Buck Creek. There's a little section of that fence still standing. It's pretty amazing how well this country preserves these pieces of history out here. And this is an old, I'm guessing this is an old cistern. It's all this hand mixed masonry that's got the local rocks and stuff in it. There's barbed wire running through this masonry. They used barbed wire to add strength to it, kind of like we use rebar these days. And all these things like this that seem relatively simple to construct by today's standards, just imagine how much effort it took to bring all these materials out here. All of this had to be hauled out here by wagon, and all of this work had to be done by hand. So I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about that Bill Brown, because he's got a pretty interesting story. He had horse camps and ranches and cow camps and homesteads scattered all over, probably 100 miles by 100 miles, which was a pretty extensive empire for then. He even had a store, a blacksmith shop, a hotel, basically his own little community there. Bill Brown was a shrewd man, and in the early years of building his empire, he began to employ a strategy of buying up pieces of land that had the water holes on them. And Bill Brown realized that he didn't have to own all the land, he just had to own the land with the water on it. And because he owned the land with the water on it, he was effectively the only one that could graze the vast tracts of land in between those water holes. But one of the neighboring ranches out there refused to stay off of Bill Brown's land. In 1886, a man by the name of John Overstreet repeatedly grazed his sheep on Bill Brown's land. After telling him several times to get off his land, Bill Brown did what any self-respecting man in the late 1800s would do. He strapped on his gun and he rode out on the range to meet John Overstreet. When the dust settled, John Overstreet had fired his gun 3 times. Bill Brown only needed to fire his once, and John Overstreet lay dead in the dirt. So I wanted to make a quick stop here because I saw these stumps out here. And what's interesting to me is these stumps here are tie back into that corral and that camp back down there that we just stopped and looked at. So these were probably the trees that they harvested to build those corrals and even build some parts of the structures that were there. So it's just pretty interesting, another little piece of the puzzle or another little piece of the story tying together. We're up here where there's some of this big older growth juniper, and this would have been the area that they came up and harvested the wood that they needed to build everything that they were building down there. Whenever I'm out in this part of country where Bill Brown's empire extended, I can't help but think about what it would have looked like riding out here on a horse or on a buckboard and looking out all around and just seeing thousands and thousands of horses that were yours out across here. So right now I'm following one old historic road that connected a couple of communities out here. But hopefully what's going to happen is I'm going to get up here to the shoulder of a butte called Yreka Butte. And Yreka Butte is named that because a section of the old Yreka Trail went across the shoulder of that butte. And where I think I'm going to hit it is just a little bit south of the butte, and hopefully I'll be able to find some trace of that old road in there. Most of you have probably all heard of the gold rush down in California, like the San Francisco 49ers. So kind of in the 40s, the 50s, around in there, 1840s, 1850s was the big gold rush down in California. Well, that started to taper off around the late 50s and the early 60s. Well, about the same time, there was kind of it actually ended up being a minor gold discovery up in Oregon. But as soon as they discovered a little bit of gold, they started promoting the heck out of it. And basically the Yreka Trail was the trail that a lot of the gold miners and gold prospectors from down in California took to get up into Oregon to catch that gold strike. And the interesting thing about the trail, or one of the interesting things about it, is almost all the traffic ever on the trail was only one-way traffic, because it was primarily just all the people coming to hit the Oregon gold rush. Now, another interesting thing, the Oregon gold rush didn't pan out to be quite what it was made out to be either. So a lot of those guys didn't do much better up in Oregon than they had down in California. All right, well, I've basically gotten myself to a place where this road is extremely rough. I'm just crawling over basically just boulder patch here, cruising along at like 1-2 miles an hour. And the worst trouble is I'm out in the middle of this scrub land. There obviously hasn't been any traffic on this road in a long time. So yeah, so at this point I'm basically just looking for anything that might be a decent camp spot. And that's going to be my next priority, is get to camp, because I want to do some cooking. I'm actually getting pretty hungry. Oh shit, this is just a freaking major boulder patch in front of me. All right, I'm gonna have to concentrate on driving here. Well, with not a minute to spare, I pulled in and found this nice little spot to camp. So I'm gonna get my rooftop tent set up. I gotta gather some firewood, get my camp set up, and man, I'm getting hungry. I can't wait to get doing some cooking. There's a nice little pile of rocks right here. I'm gonna see if I can repurpose these into a little bit of a fire reflective wall. All right, so I got a pretty good little pile of firewood. I'll need some more, but that gives me a pretty good start. So I'm gonna put up my rooftop tent really fast while I've still got a little bit of light. And like always, I'm gonna leave the buckles on this side done, because I'm just gonna fold the cover off and I'm not gonna take it completely off the Jeep. If you completely remove the cover from your rig, fold it up and stow it underneath, that adds probably a couple of extra minutes unfolding it, throwing it up on top, turning it the right direction and everything. So for me, I just like to roll my cover back and I stash it right here between the awning and the rooftop tent. I fold it under itself so that the outside of the cover stays on the outside. All right, so this tent has a really cool prototype feature that soon is going to be available on all Adventure Series tents. This tent is equipped with a gas strut system, and that means to deploy it, all I do is pull this little latch right here, and the tent deploys. That's it. It's that simple. The tent's all set up, and all I have to do now is go put my ladder up. All right, it's getting dark fast, so I'm going to get some gear out, probably get my ready light set up fairly quickly, get some light in my camp, and I'm going to wait to start my fire until I've got most of my camp setup done, which will just take me about 5 more minutes. But since I don't have a lot of firewood, I don't want my fire burning any longer than I have to. I got my camp all set up. I'm going to get a little fire going, start some coals. Let that fire start making some coals, and get my pie irons out, get my dinner stuff out, because I'm starving, guys. That was a long day and I didn't eat much on the trail. And I tell you guys that temperature started dropping once the sun went down. It's already starting to crystallize frost on the ground, so man, it sure was beautiful this afternoon, but I think it's going to be a cold night tonight. Beverage of choice tonight is a aloe vera, Fuji apple, and pear drink. I've been drinking these things lately. Alright, so let me show you guys what I'm working with for dinner here. What I did is I prepped at home some potatoes And I've got them inside this tin foil. I've got some potatoes all seasoned with some butter, salt, pink Himalayan sea salt, pepper, some herbs. And then in this one, I've got some mixed vegetables. The mixed vegetables I actually sauteed up lightly at home. So really all I'll have to do is put these 2 bags of tin foil inside the coals on the fire and give them about, probably about 20 minutes or so. And then in here, I've got, I'm so excited about this. I've got 2 bacon wrapped fillets. So what I'm going to try to do with these fillets is I'm going to cook them in the pie irons. I've got a little bit of butter and I've got a few seasonings in there. I'll just lightly salt them, throw a little bit of butter in there in the pie irons, and should be a good little meal. All right, I'm going to preheat these pie irons just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to take these guys, set them right down here. Got some coals there. Got my pie irons all heated up, so I'm going to throw the steaks in those. All right, so I got the steak in there. Just going to close it up, the pie iron. All right, my vegetables have been cooking pretty good, so I'm going to throw my steaks in. All right, guys. Oh, look at that. Oh yeah, beautiful. These look amazing. Oh my gosh, and these look amazing too. All right, guys. This is what I've been waiting for. Those potatoes are amazing. Good vegetables. That bacon wrap filet, perfect. One of the many things I look forward to about the wintertime camping is having that extra time around camp to cook. All right, I'm going to have to let you guys go and enjoy my meal. Well, guys, that dinner was amazing. The fire's nice and toasty right here. There's just almost no better place in the world than to be out someplace like this. There's not a sound, not an artificial light for miles. As I sat around the campfire with my belly full, my thoughts drifted back to the legendary Bill Brown. He had some interesting habits for sure. He would often be out and about, be in a situation where he needed to conduct business, but he was forever forgetting his checkbook. So he would write checks on a piece of cigarette paper, the margin of an old newspaper, or on a tin can wrapper. But he was such a trusted businessman that banks all over Oregon would honor his checks, regardless of what they were written on. He divided his ranch into 2 bases of operation, the Buck Creek Ranch in the north and the Gap Ranch in the south. The 2 ranches were about 20 miles apart, and in spite of the fact that he owned thousands of horses, and in later years, even an automobile, he would regularly walk the 20 miles back and forth between his 2 ranches. Bill Brown sold horses that were used by the British halfway across the world in South Africa fighting the Boer Wars. He sold horses to the U.S. Army that were used in the Spanish-American War. At the height of his horse empire during World War I, besides selling horses to private buyers all over the United States, Bill Brown was supplying horses to the armies of the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and France, and his horses, raised right here on the rangelands of Central Oregon, were in service all over the world. But after the war ended and approaching the Great Depression, the bottom fell out of the horse market. The automobile had replaced the horse as the preferred mode of transportation, and Bill was forced to begin selling off pieces of his lands just to survive. In 1935, to avoid going into foreclosure on it, Bill Brown sold the last of his land holdings to a credit union in Portland and moved into the Methodist Old People's Home in Salem, Oregon. Now, Bill Brown had been a giving man during his lifetime, and he gave extensively of his fortune to charitable organizations all around the country. And the last great irony of the Bill Brown story is that in 1941, he died without a penny to his name in the Methodist Old People's Home, a home that years before he himself had financed the construction of. Well, guys, my fire's starting to burn down. My belly's full. But I think I'm going to get myself cleaned up, brush my teeth, and crawl up into my rooftop tent for the night. Good morning, guys. Actually got a pretty good night's sleep last night. It's just barely starting to crack a little bit of daylight out there, so got my Mr. Buddy heater on. I'm having a little bit of coffee. I just mix up a packet of instant coffee in a water bottle. It's the simplest way to get my first cup of coffee in me. Get some coffee in me, a few calories, and I'm gonna head out there, gather some firewood, make some breakfast, and get exploring for the day. All right, guys, so the sun has just finally come up over the juniper trees, and it's starting to burn off a little bit of that morning cold. I think it was about 20 when I first got out of the rooftop tent this morning, so just getting geared up. So I'm running the T-Rex arm sidecar holster, the Applied Gear EDC belt. Man, I love this belt. It's super stiff, Cobra buckle, but the female side of the Cobra buckle is small enough that it'll go through my belt loops. And man, this just makes an awesome, comfortable carry setup. So you can go check out Applied Gear on Instagram. Everything's USA made, and they just seem like really cool people. So I remember in the old days when I was young growing up, going duck hunting in the mornings with my grandpa and everything, we used to always make up a thermos of coffee, and usually back then it was a Stanley mug. Well, this is kind of the modern equivalent of that. I've got a Hydro Flask here, and then I got this pretty cool mug from 2319 Designs, Jeff. You can find him on Instagram. That was pretty cool. He made me up 2 of these cups, and with the Coyote Works logo on them. That's perfect, man. That's perfect. So as you guys can see, my firewood pile dwindled last night. So the first thing I'm going to do this morning, now that I got some coffee in me, is I'm going to go gather a little bit of firewood so I can have a little bit of a fire going while I make breakfast. Oh yeah, here's a pretty good little stash of firewood. Alright, so for this morning's breakfast, I'm going to use a little bit of cast iron. I'm going to get out another little stove that's just perfect for cooking on with the cast iron. Alright, so for breakfast, I'm going to make up some oatmeal, and I've got some fresh blueberries, some fresh wild organic blueberries to put in it. So I like oatmeal in the mornings, but for me it's not a meal that really sticks with me for a long time. So I've got some pork sausages, actually some really nice pork sausages, Western Pride meats. These are nice plump guys. So what I'm going to do is I'll cook up some pork sausages in there. I'll boil some water to reconstitute my oatmeal, and then I'll have a nice breakfast that has a good amount of protein and fat in it to keep me going for a couple hours of exploring this morning. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys a pro tip. So I added the boiling water to my oatmeal, but now I'm going to cook my sausage, and I want my oatmeal to continue to reconstitute and stay nice and hot. So I actually set it in the pan that's half full of the boiling water. So that'll keep my oatmeal nice and hot while I cook my sausages. Because at the end I'm going to add some fresh blueberries to it, and then the magic ingredient, which is some half and half or some heavy whipping cream. So a little trick to cooking the sausages is I'm going to turn my pan on, and then I'm going to add just a little bit of water to the pan. And I already preheated my pan a little bit. So this is going to steam the sausages, and it's going to help me ensure that I get them cooked all the way through. And then as they get more done, what I'll do is I'll actually open the lid up and let the water boil off. We'll let those guys steam up and cook good. I'll probably give them about, 5-10 minutes or so. Alright, the sausage are about done, so it's time to put the magic ingredients in the oatmeal. So I'm going to add a little half and half, and then we'll put a few wild organic blueberries in there. Alright guys, and breakfast is served. Instant oatmeal and sausage, easy breakfast, and a good way to fuel up your adventures for the day. So as far as cleaning up my cast iron afterwards, I usually just put a little bit of water in the pan, bring it to a boil, knock anything that's sticking on the cast iron off, and then I'll just dump off that water and I'll wipe out the pan with a paper towel. Alright, well I just got geared up for a short little walk. So this is kind of the minimum that I usually have on me when I walk away from the Jeep for a little ways. So I got my Hill People gear chest pack with some basic kind of survival and trail items in it. And then I got a bottle of water inside a metal water bottle. Let's go see if we can't find that trail, or maybe at least some pretty cool Native American artifacts out there. So I'm checking around the bases of all these old growth juniper tree, looking at any place that might be an old blaze or something like that. Alright guys, check out that massive juniper tree right there. That tree right there, that could be a couple 100 years old. Alright, so believe it or not, this is a sometimes water hole right here. It's in a depression, and it probably holds water, maybe a month into the summer, depending on how much moisture there is. Now, it also should be fairly close to the path of that Yreka Trail. So I'm going to walk back over there to the other side of this and see if I can find any sign of the trail there. But this would have been a logical place, a logical point for it to come by. Alright guys. Well, I've been walking for a couple of hours now, and just now I stumbled across something. It's been trimmed along that edge, but very, very crudely. So this is here for a reason. This could actually be from the era of that trail. So far I haven't found anything else, but I take that as a really hopeful sign. Alright, so I was just doing that shot, and I looked off camera, and I saw this glinting in the sun, and I don't know what it is. It's a really interesting tool. It's thinned all along the base, worked all the way around. It looks like just the very tip of this narrow end is broken off. Very cool little find though. Alright, I'm going to leave that out here for the next person to pick up. Alright, I came in another little spot here with a few old cans. It looks like this one was opened with a knife. And they're definitely the old style tin cans with the lead solder covering the holes. Very crude. And right in here, I'm almost to the next water hole. So I'm pretty sure that Yreka Trail was going along here, running roughly north-south and going by this whole series of little seasonal lakes and water holes in here. So I'm gonna grab a couple of sips of coffee and some water, and then I'm gonna jump back on the trail, go a little ways further, and see if I can locate it another spot. Hopefully I can find it in a place where it's a little easier for you guys to see through the camera. Alright, so I just plugged a bunch of stuff into this Blackfire portable power station. So I'm still kind of getting used to it, figuring out the limitations of it and everything, but so far this has just been a game changer for me. Right now I've got a phone, camera battery, and one of my lights all charging on it. I can charge my drone batteries, I can charge all kinds of stuff from this thing, including my ready light if I needed to. And it's just handy to be able to plug everything into one unit while I'm, say, off on a hike or something like that. If you guys are interested, you can check them out. Blackfire. This is the Blackfire portable power station. So I'm going to get packed up real quick, and this is only going to take me about 10 minutes. Pretty much everything for my kitchen and cooking packs inside of 2 wolf packs that I get from Lolo Overland, including about 2 weeks worth of a food supply in there. The only part of my cooking that I pack separately from those wolf packs is my cast iron set. And the reason why I do that is because I don't always bring my cast iron with me. So I have it in a separate box. Alright, so I'm going to stow my rooftop tent. I thought I'd show you guys with this prototype tent how you stow it, as I just pull this cable down. And that's it. The tent's stowed. Now all I have to do is put the cover up on it. I just love the size of this thing, man. And I've got a perfect little spot right here where it goes. It's nice and stable, but I can run a bungee cord over it if I need to stabilize it a little bit more. And then I've got my portable power station right back here behind my seat. So while I'm on the go, I can quickly charge up batteries as I need them. Alright, so we're out of camp and back on the trail. So I'm going to work my way down here a couple of miles to another place that I think might be a logical point for that Yreka Trail. Right now this track is just barely more than a cow path, but I've only got a couple of miles to go, but depending on how rocky it is, we could just be creeping along. It's easy country to blow out a sidewall on a tire, so I'm just going to pick my way along nice and slow, enjoy a cup of coffee while I'm moving. Got my sway bars disconnected, and we'll just crawl our way along. Alright, I just wanted to get out and take a quick look. I saw this spot here with quite a few old growth juniper in it. Seemed like it might have been a nice spot for a couple old drovers or a couple old miners heading up the Yreka Trail to make a little dry camp for the night, but so far not seeing any sign of any kind of a campsite or anything. So one of your biggest enemies out here on these harsh kind of rocks like this is speed. So one of the tricks is just slowing down, taking your time. Like a lot of times I'll just put the Jeep down into four-wheel low and I'll just idle along, trying to keep a close eye out for any dangerous looking rocks that are sticking up that look like they might hit something underneath. So moving slow, paying really close attention, and just not being in a hurry, and you can get across this country without doing too much damage to your rig. Alright guys, this is pretty cool. I think I'm basically on that old trail right here. I'm following along. I'm seeing old stumps everywhere in here, and rocks moved to the side, so I'm going to see if I can find a really cool definite sign of it, and then I'll get out and show you guys. Alright, check this out guys. This may not look like much, but this pile of rocks right here was piled here by hand, and it was moved off of this shelf right up here to make the passage over that shelf nice and smooth. So this is a good sign. I've been seeing some old stumps, this pile of rocks, and I saw a couple of others, but this is the most pronounced one. Sorry about that guys, my camera ran out of batteries, but I found a really nice section of it back there. But now I'm coming up against dark. I just don't have that much time left, so I'm trying to race my way down to this one last spot where I think I can find it, and I don't know if I'm going to get there before the daylight runs out. But this is some pretty cool country back up in here, so I'm going to have to get back up in here and do some more exploring. Really cool terrain in here, man. Really like these draws in here. Nice little shelves of rim rock and some very cool country in here. All right, well, I'm losing light fast, but this is it. I think we're just gonna make it. I'm probably, I gotta be like within a couple of 100 yards of the place where that old Yreka Trail should cross this road. Right here, guys, can you kind of see it? Just heading off out in front of me out through the sagebrush there. I was trying to find a spot where you could see the stacked rocks on the side of it, but the light's failing and everything's kind of shades of gray out here, so it's really hard to see. But we are walking on it right now. Maybe you can just faintly see it dropping down off this little rise, and you can even see it heading up the other side. I'm going to run back up that way and see if we can get a little better look at it over there. Got to hurry up and try to get over to the other side so we can find a little bit of that section as it goes up the other hill. Right here, looking straight ahead, you can kind of see the long path of it. That butte off in front of us is Yreka Butte, and the trail came down just off of the left side of that butte, and where I'm on it is where it dropped down and came across this valley. But as I walk this trail, I'm just thinking about dudes in 1860 walking this trail, hoping to make it to John Day, Oregon for the John Day Canyon City Gold Rush, and just making time across this desert as fast as they could, which for them back in those days, if they had mules and things like that, probably meant that they were making about 10, 12 miles a day, maybe 15 miles on a good day. So I'm going to start working my way back to the Jeep, and the next challenge I have is figuring out how to get myself worked back down out of this little chunk of the desert. I'm probably going to be like hour, 2 hours picking my way along these secondary Jeep tracks out here, old roads out here, before I get back to any kind of improved road. I don't ever mind a long drive home after a trip because it gives me time to think and time to process the new information I've gathered from the things I've found on that trip. So imagine you're a prospector toiling away in the gold fields of California, and the last year or so you've worked hard, picking away at the soil every day, living your life in a dirty, dilapidated canvas tent, but barely scraping enough color out of the ground to make enough money to eat another week. And then one day a guy comes riding into camp talking about the new gold discovery up in Canyon City, Oregon. For the first time in a long time, your heart is filled with hope. Fueled by that hope, you get together with a couple other prospectors in camp that evening. You all pool your meager resources, make a hasty plan, and the next morning, head out on the Yreka Trail to find your fortune in Canyon City, Oregon. For me, there's just something that I can't explain about knowing that I got to walk a few footsteps along that same dusty trail that carried them on their journey over 140 years ago. And I hope all of you enjoy joining me for a few footsteps of my journey. I know I sure enjoy having you guys along. I always appreciate the support, and I look forward to many, many more. So until the next one, my friends, Coyote Works, out.